Okay, class. So now we are back here again. In the previous class, we have looked into the phenomenon of the absorption, and over there we saw that how the villi that we have in the small intestine they are adapted for the absorption process. And now we would begin to be talking about the assimilation. Now, what assimilation is that in the absorption, the kind of a situation that we created was that here we had got the blood capillaries with us. And in these blood capillaries, I moved the glucose and the amino acids into the blood. Now, these blood capillaries, they would carry these absorbed food particles or the materials to the cells of the body. And why do we need to to take them to the cells of the body? So that the cells, they can use them up in the respiration process or in the protein synthesis, and that would be beneficial for my body. So whenever you have to be remembering that what you have to be writing in under the heading of the assimilation, so you will say that this assimilation is a process in which the absorbed food particles that we have caught coming into the blood capillary, so they would move into the cells and they would be utilized for the activities of the cells. Now another scenario is that we eat more than what is required by our cells. So this means that before carrying the glucose and the amino acid to the cells of my body, I need to be regulating their amount in the blood. If I would not regulate their amount in the blood, so this would be a problem for me. So now the scenario is that after we are done with the meal, so the amount of the glucose and the amino acid that we have got coming into the blood, so this would be increased, and my body would be utilizing this homeostatic process whereby we would initially bring the amount of the glucose and amino acid to a standard level, and then we would allow them to be carried toward the cell. Now, the situation that you have to consider is that these are the small intestines, and from the small intestine, I would pick up the glucose and the amino acid, and then I would carry them to the liver with the help of this vein, and this vein is the hepatic portal vein. Now, you see that when the glucose is coming into the blood, so the pancreas would detect that, okay, fine, the level of the glucose is now more in the blood. So what the pancreas would gonna do that they would secrete the hormone and that is insulin. The insulin would be coming to the liver, and in the liver, the excess glucose that we have got, it would be converted to the glycogen. And the remaining glucose that is a need of the cells would now be taken to the cells of my body. At the same time, the excess amino acid that we have absorbed from the small intestine and we have taken them to the liver. So over there, the excess amino acid that we have got from them, their amine group would be removed. In the biological molecule, I taught you that any of the amino acid would have this carboxylic group, they would have the variable R group, they would have this hydrogen atom, they would have carbon, and they would also would contain this amine group in them. So if I have to get rid of the excess amino acids, so I would remove this amine group out of them. And when the amine group from the excess amino acid would be removed, so we would end up making this urea. Now again, my body or my liver has corrected the amount of the amino acid, and now they are in the position that we can carry the regulated amount of the glucose and the amino acid to the cells of my body. Now, once we take the glucose into the cells, so these cells they would directly use this glucose in the mitochondria and they would release the energy out of it in the form of ATP. The other role of the sugars that are rendered in the body by the assimilation process is that these sugar they would not make the complete part of the cell membrane, but they would make some part of the cell membrane. And these sugars, they also would make some part of our nucleic acids, like the nucleotide that we have in the DNA. So some of their part they are made up of the sugar. So this is how the sugars they are assimilated or they are used within the cells of my body. Now moving onward, if I try to be talking about that what functions these amino acid they would render in my body. So these amino acid, the body would make enzymes out of it and they would make hormones out of it, like the insulin and the glucagon hormone that are important for the maintenance of the blood glucose level. So they are the protein hormones, and for that we need to take the amino acid to the cells of my body. And in our daily life, this so happens is that some of the part of my body they would keep on damaging and they would need the repairing. And these amino acid would come and they would do the repairing. Whenever we have to make the new cells, so these amino acids are again required for that. If we have to be making the protein and that protein, you know, is the hemoglobin protein, and that hemoglobin is some protein that binds with the oxygen and would carry the oxygen around the body. So I again would require these amino acid. Likewise, if we have to be making some structures in the body, and by the structures, what I mean is that if you were to be making your nails, okay, and if you were to making your tendons in the body or the ligaments if you have to make in your body. So again, these amino acid that we are taking from our diet and then we are taking to the cells, so they would be utilized in that way to be making the structures that we have got in the body. Now the situation is that okay, fine, we have also absorbed the fatty acid and the glycerol from our diet, so where they would be used. Now, the fatty acids and the glycerol they would be used to make the hormone, and that hormone is a testosterone hormone. When the male individual they reach the age of puberty, so they develop the male secondary characteristics like the hair would grow on their face, under the armpits, and in the pubic areas, and their penile organ they would enlarge, so they are under the influence of the testosterone hormones that are made from the fats that we eat in our diet. Along with the glucose, these fats also have got an ability to be used up by the mitochondria to be releasing the energy. So we say that these fatty acids and the glycerol they are also the source of energy. Now, another scenario is that in my body skin, I have got this upper layer. And this upper layer, this is entitled as, or we call this as epidermis. And immediately below the epidermis, we have got this layer coming. And this layer is what we entitle it as dermis. And below the dermis, we have some specialized tissues coming over here. And these tissues, they are entitled as, or we call them as adipose tissues, we say. So in these adipose tissues, these fatty acids or the glycerol, they would be accumulated. And when they would be accumulating, so you see they are making a kind of a barrier forward for the heat to escape. So that is the reason that those of the animal that live in the very cold areas of the world, so they deposit these fatty acids and the glycerol in the adipose tissues in the form of the fat, and that would act as a biological insulator and it would prevent the loss of heat. The last part is that the major part of our cell membrane, this again is made up of the fat. So that is the reason we want these fatty acids and the glycerol to be absorbed into the blood and then assimilated in the form of these functions that I have told you. So here we are done with the assimilation phenomenon as well. So see you for the next class.